back with some enemy at the gates again, as part of the Operational Combat Series OCS by MMP. This is what looks to me like the ideal introductory scenario to OCS. It's 5 turns long, it's one map, the Russians on the attack, part of Operation Star, which was early 1943 offensive to recapture Kharkov here, and the counter density isn't too high. There's some nice open spaces on the map. We have air forces in play. You can see the Luftwaffe there and Russian air units being kept off map up over there. So this has got a bit of everything, but more it's the fact that there's some open space, but not too many units. We're not using the whole of this map sheet either. It's north of row 15, which is those, you can see the little numbers running all the way down there, so that line is the southernmost edge of the map. And so essentially what you've got is a Russian force here lined up, a lot of which in this front line you can see 12 2s and 11 1s, so strong but slow, and their ARs are very low, action ratings are very low, so they're pretty poor quality troops. But then in behind those they've got some more capable attacking forces, so you can sort of see probably a mechanised corps in there, and an HQ with another mechanised group in there, and a nice big stack in there as well. So so you've got these quite potent Russian attacking units, but then the Germans are ridiculous. You have some very poor quality, or actually I say very poor quality, looking at them, 722s isn't the worst I've ever seen. So you've got some reasonably poor Hungarian allies there, but then the vast majority of the German force here is astonishingly good. This in here is the Grossdeutschland division, which is pretty much elite action rating 5 stuff across the board. And then you've got the best units in the game. You've got an SS Panzer division, I think, in there, another SS division in here, a further SS division coming on as reinforcements in Poltava. So the Germans have 3 SS divisions and the Grossdeutschland and a small ragtag band of Hungarian allies. So qualitatively they are miles better than this Russian force. The victory conditions are interesting. The Russians have to try and take 3 hexes on the west bank of the Donets. 3 hexes on the west bank of the Donets. And that's not too far away from them, so it's going to be a real fight in here for them to push up against the Donets, and then the Germans are going to have to be wary about covering all the options so that they can have some sort of mobile defence in case the Russians force their way across somewhere. I'm not quite sure. It seems like the Russians would do well to have, multiple sort of thrusts going on that they can switch between, so that to keep the to force the Germans to have a sort of active defence and be reacting to them. Not quite sure how that's going to work out. We'll see what I can do. And obviously then I've not used air really so far in my OCS games, a little bit in my aborted attempts to play reluctant enemies, but not that much. So there's obviously the air factor in play as well. The Germans have got a slight advantage in quality. Their fighters are just a little bit better. Their bombers are probably about on a par with the Russians, but they have more. They have 2 air bases to the Russians' 1, and that means that they can keep more aircraft flying and refit them. The entirety of their air force, whereas the Russians are restricted to. I think they have a level 2 airbase which will restrict them to 6 active aircraft at any one time according to 4.1a rules that I'm using. Russians open things up then here in Operation Star in Enemy at the Gates. The weather roll was such that the air forces are grounded, so poor weather, low cloud, storm, whatever, is preventing any of these aircraft taking off, and that the Soviets would have liked their air force available to bomb some of the forward German positions, try and get some DGs on them. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible, so they had to move forward without the benefits of their air force. In the south here, combat went quite poorly for them, but they forced the Germans back, but they had to take a loss themselves, which was very unpleasant. They lost a really good Guard cavalry unit, forced the Germans back and captured some supply. Up here in the middle, though, they've had more success. That stat there in particular, the 15th tank there, deliberated for a while about a 3-to-1 attack against a very strong SS mechanised unit, a sort of 10-5-8 mechanised, and finally decided that it probably wasn't going to get a better shot at such a powerful unit, and went for it, and managed to destroy it. So very good stuff there, and they've had some good combat results further up here, and ploughed into the Hungarians up on the north side of the front there. Didn't get to grips at all with the Grossdeutschland, and some German units which had started in reserve parts of the Grossdeutschland moved to occupy this crossing of the Donets there, and this SS division, which was also in reserve, moved to occupy the sort of central bridges leading into Kharkov there. So it's now the Germans' turn. They've got to obviously try and find their sort of defensive positions and just move back while harrying this Russian advance. And obviously they've got some decisions to make about how they're going to defend various parts of the line, because these Hungarian allies right up here aren't going to hold out, and that's stack there I think is mainly supply and artillery and trucks or whatever. I'm not quite sure what's in there. I don't think it's very good combat units though, so they've got to also allocate some sort of defensive force to that section up there around Belgorod, which maybe that SS division, or maybe it's a job for the Grossdeutschland, although the Grossdeutschland I think may be part of the defence for this sort of central section of the Donets between Belgorod and this main road to Kharkov. Anyway, we'll see what the Germans decide to do. Starting turn 2 here in Operation Star at Enemy at the Gates. You can see quite clearly what's happened with those shapes on the board. The Germans have established their defensive line along the Donets, and are inviting the Russians onto them to some extent. So you have the SS division down here on the southern stretch, the Grossdeutschland in the centre, and then another SS division up on that northern sector, and a bit of a speed bump of the the Hungarians in the way there. Whether this turn allows the use of air force, so the aircraft will now be coming into play this turn. The Germans won initiative and perhaps unwisely have given the Russians the initiative for now. They're happy to react and see where, or at least that's how I'm playing them, that they're going to react, see where the Russians are making ground and where they're being held up, and react accordingly. So it's the Russians to go. It's and I have to start trying to use air power effectively now. I don't think. I think from the Russian point of view, they will probably maybe fly some fighter sweeps to try and take down German fighters, and then and possibly a few barrage missions to see if they can crack any difficult spots. But I mean, it really relies on them getting up into some sort of position to make their attack, and this might be a sort of setup turn, I think, for the Russians. I'll see how much ground they can make, but a lot of these Russian units are far from quick. You can see 1 and 2 movement points in there, 3 movement points. So that section is quite strong. There's a lot of factors in it, but there's absolutely no speed there at all. And so this may very well be a sort of set-up turn. And the Germans might get cheeky and try and counter-attack if that's the case. Anyway, we'll see what happens. But the Germans have dropped back behind the Donets to regroup and just make sure they've got the basics covered before the Russians arrive. Operation Star in Enemy at the Gates. Just finished the Russian portion of turn 2. They've cleared out this area in front of the Donets River by and large, with some slightly obstinate pockets of resistance just up here, but other than that, everything has either pretty much retreated behind the river line or has been wiped out. The Russians flew an air mission to bomb that unit there. The Germans intercepted with their fighter, but that fighter lost the air-to-air combat, and the Germans successfully struck the unit, and then that large stack there attempted to cross the river from 3625 from the woods there and attack across this Donets, which is frozen major river. So it was half factors, but they still had a 7-1 attack. No surprise, rolled terribly, got something like a 4, forced to retreat. So they nearly made it across the Donets on turn 2, and that may end up being one of their great chances, but as it is, they couldn't get across. So they had to retreat and lick their wounds, and the Germans will now get to reinforce where they want to. All these supply lying around are where I'm not keeping it as usual, not keeping it buried under stacks of stuff that I just have to keep taking apart and putting back together again. That seems like a chore. In fact, it is a chore. So there it is. So the Germans now have to work out, have to think about what to do. They'll get some reinforcements, I think, come on in a second, but they'll be way over here somewhere. There'll be a bit of road movement for them to get them up towards the front. It's a question of shifting around a little bit more, perhaps, because they have to be careful, because those hexes up there still count as the west bank of the Donets. So if the Russians get sneaky and slide round into that area there, they could have 3 hexes to the west of the Donets very, very quickly indeed. So the Germans need to be a little bit cautious about that, and perhaps some of this SS division, don't know which one, don't know what all the letters stand for, but they need to be a bit cautious about that anyway. Who's this? This is SS Adolf Hitler, I think. The AH, I think that's SS Adolf Hitler. This is SS. No idea who that is. There's one that's T, and I've got a feeling that's Totenkopf, and they might be coming on in a minute. Anyway, onward. The Germans are sat behind the Donets, watching the Russians roll towards them. But I mean, this German stuff is so good that it's really going to take something pretty special from the Russians to get through, and I think they are going to have to attack at multiple places along the front and hope they get some success somewhere, and they probably need to be putting pressure on, as far along the line as possible, which is very difficult when you're halved attacking across the river and the stuff on the other side is a SS Panzer division, but that's what the Russians are facing, and it's, as always with this game, it's got a lovely shape and a lovely ebb and flow to it, or this particular scenario especially does. Short but open and interesting, and yeah, you can sit and plot and plan to your heart's content. So I'll see what the Germans come up with. The Russians have won initiative coming into turn 3 in Operation Star, and have decided to go first, and this is the situation they're faced with. You can see that German defensive line still along the river there, and the Russians have attempted to move forward. The Germans really didn't do a lot in their previous turn. I was caught in 2 minds about whether to try and counterattack with them or just to stay put. Decided to stay put largely and try and use some air power or some artillery to blunt the Russians' ability to attack, and that's kind of what's happened in the south here. You can see a DG on that big stack, Russian stack there, which even without a spotter, they flew an air mission against it, which missed, but then they had a pop at it with that big SS artillery unit over there on the left, and that DG'd it. And then similarly up here, they flew an air mission against that as well, and DG'd it. So they've blunted the sort of Russian attacking threat for now. What in terms of the big stacks sat, the big army groups and whatever corps sat right near them. What I am looking at for the Russians is the possibility of some of this armour making a sprint across here and aiming into these woods right down there on the southern edge of the board, just to the south of, however that's pronounced, Shmiev. So in this area down here above sort of 29, 15, 16, 17, 18 in there, and if they could get into that area with some armour, I think the Germans have got another SS. I think that's Totenkopf division coming into play, but it'll be a couple of turns before the rest arrives, and it'll be a way away. It'll be way off over here. So I think if the Russians can get down into this area, and force something. It'll start forcing things to happen. I don't know whether those will be good things for the Russians, but it'll start forcing things to happen. It'll either force the Germans to route stuff down here to deal with it, or to try and venture into this area to cut supply, because the supply links, I'm going to have to think very carefully about how they stay in supply. Supply is going to be very tenuous if they carry out this plan. So they are going to have to think quite hard about those kind of things. But it looks like an interesting possibility simply because it may force the Germans out of this very comfortable linear defence of the river and force them to start looking at other things to do, either attacking, counter-attacking, cutting supply, and amidst all that they may then open up opportunities and gaps for more infiltration of their position. So that's what the Russians are looking for at the moment. They're just trying to ease the Germans out of their sort of very comfortable sit on the river line and watch position. And similarly up here, right up on the northern edge of the Donets, I think they might have a look at a similar sort of run right at that northern area. With some of this stuff to see if they can't sort of start rolling down the river line. Unfortunately down there it's a lot better defended, and this SS division has taken up some pretty active positions to prevent that, and there's very strong stuff up there, so not so optimistic about their chances up there, but we'll see. We'll see whether they can do anything. And air power is in play again this turn, so the Russians can fly air missions and see if they can disrupt attempts for German reaction as well. So it should be an interesting turn. Yeah, at the halfway stage in Operation Star from Enemy at the Gates, and the Russians have gone about this plan that I'd thought about and managed to push across the Donets right down on the south edge of the playable area on this map, and have pushed 3 armour units across there, all very weak. You can see they're flipped onto their move mode, so they're only 2 strength. But they are there, and if the Germans can't dislodge them, all of them, then their backup could arrive quite quickly and it could get a bit out of hand. So the Germans have got a bit of a problem on here. They have a part of an SS division in there, but I'm not sure what's in there at the moment. Elsewhere up the river line, there's sort of standoffs. Again, very weak stuff in move mode here, but I don't know if the Germans, because they're either side of a river looking at each other, you're halved trying to attack across it, and no armour bonuses particularly, and so that could all get, there's not a lot to be gained from it. Of course that stuff is AR1, and you look at the SS on the other side and it's AR5, so they could try and break through by using relying on surprise rolls. There's some big spaces in this Russian attack, but not spaces big enough to get supply through, so that will stop truck supply, and with the river it's pretty much impossible to get the Germans to get supply into this area, so they could do a sort of suicide charge into this area to try and cut Russian supply. But I'm not into that kind of thing, it's true that one of these units could flip into move mode and go herring across the board here and try and cut into this rail line or something. But it may well die from attrition the moment it does it, which doesn't seem very sensible. So that's the situation in the south here. And then up in the north, I'm not sure how my zoom's going to do. The Russians looked to get into this area right up in the north, attacked into that stack where that artillery unit is, the 6125 artillery unit, attacked into there and caused a step loss of an infantry division that's underneath that artillery, but it wasn't enough and they were forced to retreat as part of the combat results. Otherwise the Russians have been a little bit slow in terms of getting in any sort of engagement. Up here you can see there are a few. There's some distance, 10 miles or so, between the forces up there. But yeah, coming into this German part of the turn, they've got to try and deal with this cheeky little incursion into the West Bank down here. The other thing the Russians did was they managed to get some HQs into the area. Yeah, they sorted out their supply net a bit better and actually built, again, I don't stack everything in a huge stack, so that aircraft and the airbase is actually under the HQ, and similarly up, if I move the camera up here, there's an HQ up there, again with a Russian fighter on it, in an airbase that they've just built. So they've got some sort of close air support now to stop the Germans just hip shooting and bombing their units. Unfortunately, I don't think that fighter will cover these kind of units, but it won't get far enough over here to cover this lot, unfortunately. But that's just tough. The way it's worked out, I could probably have done it better, and had I known that this was the plan all along, I probably would have. But I'm making it up as I go, and that's where the situation they've ended up in. I'm equally incompetent for the Germans, so I think it all evens out.